Wow, so okay, this episode had a lot to question here, but as well, one that I'm still kind of like trying to figure out, and that is Daki going to die midway through this season? I mean, basically what they set up in this episode is at least we know what is likely to be the downfall of her character, unless she is bailed out from somebody like Muzan Jackson. Are we going to be seeing Daki die in the next episode? I don't know how to feel about that. Either way, let's go ahead and get right into the discussion for the episode itself. So at the beginning of this episode, Tengen actually finds Hinatsuru, which, I mean, pretty much says right there that, yeah, we're probably going to see the other two wives in this episode. But actually, I didn't realize that that was Hinatsuru the whole time, but he gives her some medicine to help with all the poison she had to take because, well, what actually ended up happening is that Daki got suspicious of Hinatsuru, and so because of that, she gave her an obi, and through that obi, she was able to, I guess, sense or just able to slowly kill her. It's actually pretty interesting when you think about this because it shows that Daki is a very suspicious person, and she's very, very paranoid. I mean, it goes to show that, I guess, even with all of that power that Daki has, especially from the actions and the way that we'll talk about later in the episode, how she treats her enemies, especially people like Tanjiro, she doesn't have her priorities straight, and I think this is going to be the biggest downfall of Daki, is that she's too paranoid and she doesn't take anything as seriously as she should. But it is also adorable to see Tengen and his wife again. Oh, it's so cute. Speaking of Tengen though, he's actually able to sense an underground cavern of sorts, and so what he does is he uses sound breathing first form roar to blow a hole in the ground. I like this next scene though, because this next scene shows Tanjiro's just undying will to not only do the right thing and be a good guy, but as well, actually how far Tanjiro has come in his fighting and his ability, especially since the events of Mugen Train. And I really think like this should be said because this season has been really good at developing all three of our main boys, and I quite enjoy that so much. But as for senses though, we mentioned Tengen was able to sense an underground cavern of some sorts. Well, Daki is able to sense actually 4 of the Demon Slayers plus Hinatsuru, which means that, well, if they're probably going to have to kill Daki here, because if they let Daki escape, she knows probably too much about the Demon Slayers already, how many there are, probably can figure out who they are pretty quickly, I would assume at the very least. So that's another death nail with Daki. She's probably going to die this season, and that makes me sad, makes me very sad. Talk more about that in a moment though. I do like how Daki tries to convince Tanjiro to basically have him spill the beans on where the rest of the Demon Slayers are, and I like how Tanjiro doesn't do it. He doesn't give up, he doesn't listen to her. That's such a good part of Tanjiro's character. He's such a good guy. I mean, he's the MC after all. I just really enjoy that consistency in his character because I think it adds to his charm. I think a part of his charm is that he's this, I don't want to say basic in a negative way, but like a really basic, just good guy. Another detail I like about this scene as well is that Tanjiro's blade is chipped, and he makes note that this is because the wielder of the blade is not good enough. I like that bit. I thought that was really nice. It added to the lore and mystique of the Demon Slayer universe, of just the technique of being a wielder of a sword like that. It really shows that the people who do wield the swords, if they don't get them chipped, that means that they're actually really, really good swordsmen. And I quite enjoy that detail because that shows that, you know, people like Rengoku, for example, we never saw his blade get chipped. So it's just one of those nice little details where it doesn't really mean anything because you're not really supposed to think about this, but once you do, you're like, oh wow, that's like really cool. It rewards you for actually thinking about what Tanjiro is actually saying here. Also, what does that mean if Inosuke's blade has been chipped like a handful of times? Does that mean he's a bad swordsman? I mean, technically yes. Because he just takes a rock and smashes his blade. I don't think any swordsman would do that, right? Put down in the comments below. Is Inosuke a terrible swordsman or not? Going by Tanjiro's This is where the episode really gets interesting, especially for Tanjiro in this battle, because Tanjiro, he can't really use the water breathing very well. He can actually use the Hinokami Kagura better because it suits him better. That being said, he feels that he has trained for this moment and that he can actually use the Hinokami Kagura twice in this battle. That's really cool. I think it shows Tanjiro's fortitude. I think it shows his confidence in his character to be able to take this down, and I think that's a really important trait you have to have in situations like these, especially for your main character, to have the confidence to actually go out there and do what he says. So he uses the Hinokami Kagura Raging Sun, which looks absolutely phenomenally beautiful. Holy crap, Ufotable, you are the masters at doing all of this. This is some of the best stuff I've seen this year. Why? Because it's only the second day of 2022. That's why. I can say that. You see? I can say that. It's not exaggerating or anything like that. It's the actual Daki, truth. Really cool. She immediately notices that his breathing technique has changed, which means something is going on here. And while this happens, he immediately uses the flame dance, the Hinokami Kagura once again. And it's really cool because it's apparently a combination of this, two combos in particular. One of them is the fake rainbow, which is actually designed to confuse the enemy with like this after vision. And actually the faster the opponent is, the more clear they'll be able to see that, which I think that's a really cool detail there, because it shows that actually it doesn't matter how powerful this technique really is. It matters how powerful your opponent is and how quick, specifically how quick. We know for a fact people like Tengen are really fast. So if we use that in the context of a Tanjiro and Tengen fight, well, he wouldn't be able to really use this move because Tengen would probably see it pretty clearly, the after image. What's really cool about this though is we don't know much about Daki's speed. We know she's pretty powerful. She has use of all of these threads, so that makes her a very, very dangerous opponent. But if she's not fast enough, well, the move isn't really gonna work. To spoil you all, well, the move is just too slow for Daki, which makes a lot of sense because as we saw in the previous episode, his body was going numb by that time, and he's already used the Hinokami Kagura. So obviously, it's probably not going to work really well against Daki, at least in the current state of Tanjiro's body, because he actually mentions that after she blocks the move, like, Tanjiro says to himself that his body is already reacting to actually using the move, almost like a recoil of sorts. It's really, really cool. So his attacks now have slowed down considerably, just his normal attacks. And we learn through a short little flashback that actually the reason probably for him being a little bit weaker is actually Tanjiro and Kiyo kept his fever a secret from Shinobu, which in turn let him out earlier. And I do want to say before we continue any further with this scene, because I really want to mention that Kiyo's reactions are they were so adorable and funny. I love this season, guys, especially for its comedy. I love it. I cannot say that enough. But anyways, it's really cool though with Tanjiro's fever and how this works, because the longer he has a fever, the better it allows him to actually use the Hinokami Kagura, and actually allows him to use it more than once. I find this an interesting mechanic because what this basically means is that he's going into a battle pretty much handicapped. It's almost like something you'd see in Dark Souls. That ring that takes like half of your life, but it gives you very strong sorcery or magic. I forget which. I haven't played Dark Souls 1 in a while, but it's almost like that. And so he's going into this battle. He's kind of gimped already because he has this fever, but at the same time, it allows him to use this trump card of using the Hinokami Kagura more than once, which is, especially at the stage that Tanjiro is at, really useful, but it doesn't work. And that's the thing that is kind of the trade-off here. If you don't use it like immediately and win, well, you're in a situation where, as Tanjiro says, he has to basically fight to win this. He can't let this go to a draw, because if he lets this go to a draw, then he'll probably die, because there is no draw in this scenario pretty much. But still, Tanjiro has the fortitude, and he will not let anyone experience the same thing, the same kind of loss that he's went through. And I think that was a brilliant way to leave off the fight, at least in this episode, because it shows to me that Tanjiro throughout the whole of this battle has gotten much better. Much better. He's actually gotten way stronger than probably from when we even last seen him. And I think that is simply due to all the training. I think that's due to all the experience, but I think as well, it probably has to do a lot with Tanjiro's pride. You know, after going going through the stuff he went through with Rengoku, he probably feels the motivation and the fire, as Rengoku said in this episode, as they did a callback to go further, to keep moving onward, and to, you know, have that blaze in your heart. And I think that is probably what wills Tanjiro on more than anything else currently right now to get the job done and to slay Daki and save everyone. Inosuke found a hole at Ogimoto. It was his hole. It was specifically built for him. So he dislocates all of his joints to get into the hole and slithers like an eel. I don't even know. I don't even really know how to react to this other than just complete and utter shock. This was okay. Okay. So we figure out that as Inosuke goes through this hole, that there is this cavern that Daki has created, which is basically a bunch of her threads, or essentially what is her, which is kind of actually the theory that I had originally, which is Daki is a bunch of threads, a bunch of these cloths. And what it is just a bunch of cloths, but it has all of the people within those cloths that she has prepared to eat when she needs to eat them. This is really frightening. This is really freaky, but I still love Daki. I'm sorry. I know I probably shouldn't, but it's just the crazy anime ladies. Sometimes they get me and I can't help it. Daki is one of those crazy ladies. But the key here is that one of the threads confronts Inosuke. So Inosuke starts to take down a bunch of the threads, and from here we see something really interesting. Daki wants to keep the most 10 beautiful ones and eat the rest to gain strength. Once again, like I said at the top of the video, I think this is one of the reasons why Daki is going to fail. She's not taking any of this as seriously as she could. Also, it seems like the obi or the sash or whatever and Daki themselves are somewhat of different entities, or maybe it's just that she created this obi to be a separate entity. I'm actually, we're just still not sure how this works quite yet, but it is actually, I think, a really fascinating way to go about doing this whole sash obi thing, because it just makes the whole dynamic between Daki and how she gets her strength and power so much more interesting and more dynamic, in my opinion. Also, I do want to say, now that we talk about this, man, Daki's voice actress, she is killing it in this episode. I loved her snide remarks in this episode of Tanjiro and how annoying she was. She is definitely that bitch, if you know what I'm saying. So I really enjoyed Daki's voice actress. She is doing an amazing job with her. But Inosuke uses some of his beast breathing, and through that he is able to essentially just free up a bunch of people, which leads to Suma and Makio. They are actually freed by Inosuke, and to me, Suma is super adorable. I think she's the one that I like the most, which is weird to say because I thought I would like Makio the most based just off her visual design, but I feel like Makio is actually, at least from what I see in this episode, the one that I may dislike the most. I'm still not sure about Hinatsuru, but Suma is pretty adorable. She reminds me of Inosuke, says she'll die, she's not really good at fighting and all this stuff, which Makio is like scolding her for that, which I thought was pretty funny. And then we see Zenitsu. He finally breaks out as well. He uses his thunder technique, and I like how Inosuke is like, maybe he should just be asleep like all the time. I love that fourth wall humorous, almost fourth wall breaking kind of stuff. It really shows to me that the writers are very self-aware of what this series is and they're into it. And I enjoyed that comment. I thought that was hilarious. Then we see Tengen. He arrives as well. And it's just this reunion of sorts between Suma and Makio and Tengen. And we have this like really cool flashback where Tengen tells basically the Kunoichi to take care of themselves. They are more important than the mission, because Tengen is a demon slayer. He can go around and he can protect people's lives. His life comes last in all of this, which I think really impresses Makio, because Makio never thought that way before. She always thought that since she was a female Koinichi, that because she is physically not as strong as the male demon slayers, or I guess the male ninja in this case, that she would have to put her life first to get anything done. But what Tengen tells her is something that's going against that, and I think she really respects that, but at first she doesn't really know how to react to it because she's only been doing this job one way for probably most of her life, and this man is gorgeous, flashy man comes along and is like, hey, just don't worry about it. Protect yourselves before anybody else. And this reflects what in the last episode that Tengen told Tanjiro and Inosuke, which I very much appreciated. Overall, though, I want to talk about some two things I want to talk about before we get to the end of this video, and that is, one is the reason that Tanjiro's father died is because of the Hinokami Kagura. Just to go back a little bit, because this is kind of like one of my main theories coming from this episode, and I think it's important we discuss this, because Tanjiro talks about how he has to have a fever to use the Hinokami Kagura twice. So if that is the case, then did that shorten Tanjiro's father's life significantly, always possibly being under fever and being sick? If so, I wonder if this is going to shorten the lifespan and just the general well-being of Tanjiro over time, and he'll have to compensate for that, much like his father possibly did. These are just a couple questions that I have and a couple theories coming from the episode, and it's actually pretty subtle. I don't think they've ever really mentioned why Tanjiro's father truly died and how it came about, but if it is because of the Hinokami Kagura, then, well, it'll be sad days for Tanjiro. And another is that I don't want her to die, but they're probably gonna kill Daki, and it makes me so sad. And this episode was so good too. I really love this episode, and I love Daki. I think she's just so mean and evil and just cool, man. She's just so cool. Look at her design. Why? Why do all the villains have such great designs in Demon Slayer? I don't know why, man. I just want them to live, and it's Daki's great, and yeah, she's also hot too, but she's great. Cool design. She's so evil, and yes, I do have a thing for evil women in anime, but gosh darn. Anyways, put down in the comments below what you thought about this episode. Oh yeah, another question as well before you leave is which of Tengen's 3 wives do you like the most currently? So for me, currently it's Suma, but which out of 3 do you like? Tsuru, Suma, or Makio? Put down in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, especially that one. And as well, while we wait for next week's episode, be sure to check out my video on Attack on Titan Final Season Explained before you get into Final Season Part 2. It'll catch you up on everything you need to know. It's a pretty great video, I promise. Bye-bye!